That's welcome to the jungle. That was for you, Mark. You're in the jungle.
Welcome to the jungle, baby.
Yeah.
We have to do the chorus so we can really sing.
You know where you are?
You're in the jungle, baby.
You're in the jungle, baby. See, that's what I was expecting you guys to do. Come on, you want me to do it again? Hola, everyone.
Hola, ¿cómo estás?
Hey, so welcome to IoT Coffee Talk. How you guys doing this morning?
Still asleep.
Yeah, me too. Wow.
Yeah.
It's brutal. Maybe it's the hot weather, right? So, hey, we're going to be talking about 5G, right? We can all use a little bit of 5G, or at least Mark can use 5G where he is. He's in the jungle. And then Stephanie's in a parking lot somewhere, right?
With her 5G phone.
Yeah, and with her data plan running out.
I haven't set it up. That's why I always get behind, because if you think about it, when you're attached to all your apps and you're doing all of these things with your apps, especially for school and the kids and everything, I'm like, oh my gosh, it's an undertaking to make sure everything. It's not the app loading. It's, oh my gosh, what was my password on all that stuff?
Yeah, struggle is real, for sure.
The struggle is real.
Can I tell you how am I connected?
Yes.
So
with a shoestring.
Let me explain you how am I connected.
Okay.
So actually, I'm in the middle of the jungle, and 4G is not working. So I disconnected my 4G and I forced the phone to go with 3G, and this is how I'm here connected.
Wow.
Not even 4G or 5G, 3G.
Wow. And you know what? They don't make them like they used to anymore.
Oh, they don't. You're right. That's awesome.
Quite literally.
3G for the win.
And you know what? It's funny. Mark might be the only user, the only non-machine-to-machine user on that 3G network sector right now. So he can use video. There's no competition right now.
Yeah, right.
Wow.
Yeah, good point.
Wow.
It's
Nice.
like using Skype for video instead of Zoom. There's no competition on it anymore.
So we have everything represented here. We have 3G, we have 4G cable, and then fiber to the home. It's like,
and I've got my 5G phone.
Oh yeah!
Wow,
beautiful.
I've got a 5G phone too. Samsung.
Outstanding. Yeah.
Yeah.
Samsung for the win.
Indeed. Yeah. No pun intended.
Exactly.
Yeah, so hey guys, let's get into it. So 5G, why should anybody in the IoT world care about 5G? Mark, I was supposed to speak on this, right, at Mobile World Congress before it got canceled. What do you guys think, 5G?
So specific to IoT, one of the things that I'm very much looking forward to see scale from 5G is the ability to grow from something like, I don't know, 10 to 11,000 devices per sector on LTE to go into the millions for the same sector on 5G, because it will force us or whoever that infrastructure owner to think, wow, if I have all this availability, what else can I do? What else can I leverage? Because I can sensorize more of my environment. I can leverage more of the metadata of my environment. So that one I'm excited about, as well as the range increase. Someone will have to correct me on it, but I believe that it's a 5-fold increase from reach of 5G over LTE, depending which band and whatnot. But those two, I think, will be really good for IoT in the wild for 5G. And now Mark gets to disagree.
Yeah, 5 times range. That I've never heard that part, but that's interesting.
Well, good thing I said, someone will correct me. I think there is a range difference per sector as far as coverage. But
yeah, definitely based on spectrum you're using. Yeah, range. Yeah.
Yeah, we do like the idea of 1 million simultaneously connected devices in 1 kilometer around a cell tower.
Kilometer.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing.
Square kilometer.
Yes. Yes.
Not kilometer. We're talking square kilometer. Yeah. Mm.
Wow.
That's the story. It's better than dozens of devices.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. So, Mark, what's your rebuttal?
I'm not a big fan of cellular connectivity on IoT. Actually, I would ask to David, what's the use case where you see millions of devices connected with cellular technology on the internet nowadays? I cannot think on any of these. And I have to open another melon. I love the LP1 technologies, so low power wide area networks and long range. I also have a lot of experience of NB-IoT, which is not directly connected only with 5G, as well 4G. I think this is something that telcos invented, or well, actually not, the antenna manufacturers invented to battle LoRa's and Sigfox and these LP1 technologies. I also have these a lot of stories about NB-IoT projects where, maybe the technology is not needed because there are other alternatives like LoRa or Sigfox. But so it's basically because, the energy that it's needed, it's even higher than other technologies. So I don't see a lot of cellular technologies where you need in a specific cell like millions of connections at the same time. I don't know if you can tell me like a use case on that.
Let's not go into use cases, right? Because, I was the one that came up with what's the business case and forget the use case. But here's the reality today. All of us in the IoT world know that the cost, let's just pretend that the networks are there and the use cases are there and the business cases are there. We're still going to look at, wait, hold on. 5G is quite new. So the device cost when compared to LTE is too much, forget about it. These are the same battles that we were having when 4G was new 11 and a half years ago. And we're like, oh, no way. It's 8 times cheaper or 10 times cheaper to go to 3G. But look at the cost of LTE now. So, with that, I think it'll be a while until there's this adoption. And then the use cases or the business cases will come down to niche applications that will need to leverage something that only 5G release 16 or 17 could deliver. Like it could be a latency thing that it just won't work on LTE. Or it could be a commercial contractual quality of service where you will need URL LLC, which you can't really do otherwise. So I'm not ready to battle you yet, Mark, but I think it will be just that. There will be niche things that will need 5G for, but right now, in the context of IoT, it's very much, lots of LTE development, but the conversation flips if we go into a fixed site, so a factory, a plant, a campus, and we're discussing private 5G and industrial IoT. So, there's a split there.
Yeah. That's really interesting. The private networks, that's a really interesting topic, actually, that 5G brings on the table.
Well, yeah, you do have it with LTE on unlicensed bands. So it's not unique to 5G. I think what you're seeing is an evolution. And the important thing for IoT folks to understand is that 5G, these things that are promised are not there day one, right? It's actually a very complicated roadmap if you look at the 3GPP release sequences and how the different work items that have been kind of congregated into each one of these releases. So the opportunities are going to be progressive over the next decade going into whatever it is. I assume it's going to be 6G coming in maybe 20 years from now.
You just triggered me.
Oh, no. Is that my role?
Yeah.
Just to trigger Rob?
You're just here to fire 6G microaggressions at people, Yeah, so I can't handle it, dude.
That's why I put it on 20 years. I didn't put it on 10.
No, that's true. Hey, but, I could talk a little bit about the private stuff, the private LTE and private 5G, because I just happen to work for a company that makes that gear and sells it to customers. And I know there's other people who do the same thing. No doubt about it. The idea of private LTE for companies and stuff like that has been around for a while. In the past, the gear you needed for an enterprise, big company to do private LTE was usually intimidating to the IT department folks. And yes, expensive. Because it was telco-looking gear that your typical IT person has no idea what that is. It's way over their head. at Ericsson, we took that to heart and built something called Industry Connect, which was basically, hey, let's build something that's just a few 1U rack servers that kind of looks like Cisco gear that all your IT folks do understand, and make it, everybody says, I need such and such in a box kind of thing. And so, I don't know, let's see, maybe a year and a half ago, we brought this idea to market with these things called radio dots that they basically look like a smoke detector in your house. But basically it's just saying, hey, I already have my LAN, my network at my company already, Ethernet going through the walls and everything, and I have Wi-Fi access points, a zillion of them everywhere to try to give you coverage. And in this case, you can use LTE, and then it was upgradable to 5G. And then you plug in these radio dots, maybe in the ceiling in your warehouse or factory or your campus, and just plug it right into Ethernet that's coming out. And so it just kind of is a swap, except instead of using a huge number of Wi-Fi access points, you use just a handful of these radio dots, and now you're roaming seamlessly throughout your factory and stuff like that. The upside of that, better performance, better RF characteristics, especially around like heavy metal objects and things like you might have in a factory. Security is awesome because in addition to giving you all this gear, we also give you a SIM writer. And so you write your own SIMs that go on your SIM-based IoT devices, machines, whatever, or phones that are participating in this private network. And so the whole thing is encrypted end to end, and the only people or things that get to be on that network have a SIM that you created. And so it was a great solution to increase your level of security as well. It's pretty cool stuff. Yeah. But there was always an elephant in the room in the past. The elephant in the room was, let's say you sold the customer on the idea of doing private LTE and they're excited. And then you'd say, oh, by the way, I need you to call David over at Verizon because I need you to get some spectrum from them in order to do this. And that could be a deal killer. I'm sure Verizon and everyone else is going to like, oh, yeah, we'd love to carve off some spectrum for you here for your plant, Yes, it's going to cost you. And that could inevitably, everything else about the deal could be perfect, and then that ended up being the deal killer. But today we have CBRS, which given us that mid-band spectrum that the government's doling out to enterprises and others, where you can say, hey, I need spectrum just for this area, a few miles or a mile radius or in this county or this whatever, and then you can have it. And so that combined with this technology I'm describing is making this real. And so I think a lot of the things that, some of us were hoping to see a few years ago are now going to finally happen because it's doable.
Yeah, I would say too, when you think about, you mentioned, David, business cases, I think for now, the early business cases it's got to be cost effective for any of the solutions that are already on 3G. Some of them are sunsetting 2G or are already on 4G. And so most of that was really more not infrastructure, not in the building. It's anything that's roaming or moving outside of a facility. Mm-hmm. So it's asset tracking and fleet tracking and anything else that's moving from point A to point B. The other thing is we could see, and if 5G, right now 5G is so focused on the NFL cities, right, the big cities. 5G, though, is very capable, if put out in the rural areas, very capable of replacing no broadband options in rural America and no broadband options in rural America where there are buildings and factories and things that are out and more outside of the cities. And in that case, the economics make sense. If they're running 5 megabytes per second and now they have 150, 250 megabytes per second, they would jump for joy, and they would probably pay a premium to have that kind of access in their facility out in a rural area where they haven't had it before. But the economics generally don't make sense for them to build and put those, to build out the towers. They generally will start off in the big cities. So in places where they really need 5G and where this could be very beneficial out in rural America, it's just not there yet. So right now, everybody's if these fixed wireless providers get access, or they do something with with the CBRS vendors, then we can really see an uptick there. But outside of that, I think use cases are really more of anything that's moving. So you got to think of mobile, portable, that kind of use case right now. On the David's point about the factory, and Rob, it's interesting that you share that information. I think the economics have been deal breakers. So the more we can really focus on budget and economics, and if it's only going to save me X percent and maybe it's 5%, 10%, then it may not be worth the headache from an IT perspective and changing everything. So there's a lot at stake right now for businesses.
Let's recognize that we have a huge gap in broadband in the US. There's tens of millions that just don't have access, it's a problem, especially now. I think any company that figures out where is this mass population of underserved broadband users that I can effectively and efficiently deliver infrastructure to just blanket this area, I think that's an angle that some companies are looking at. Basically, I'm going to go into this territory, I'm going to repeat some builds, and then just provide a local offer. And it might be a while with 5G until it's just truly covering rural areas, unlike the maps, because there's population and then there's geographic coverage, and they're two separate things. In regards to the factory bit, there's not a single customer out there that's not cost conscious. I mean, like most people are good making monetary decisions. But I'll tell you this, in addition to cost is in manufacturing, we have to consider time to market, we have to consider safety, and we have to consider efficiency, not just cost. One of the business cases that seems to have one of the quickest ROIs, return on investments, are the AGVs, autonomous or automated. Again, that's different words, but the guided vehicles. Why? You're lifting labor out. You're making these folks do something else in there. You're reducing accidents. You're reducing injuries. You're moving material faster. And one of the challenges that some manufacturers have is that they've had infrastructure to serve their operations, and that infrastructure was not designed to all of a sudden take AGVs to be running around the factory. So an opportunity, like Rob was saying, with private LTE or private 5G, is like, hey, you can get this infrastructure quickly, stand up your AGVs now because your business case, your payoff is not bad. And oh, by the way, now you can grow this because you can do 1 million devices per sector, and you can privatize it, et cetera, et cetera. So that's where my mind went, because sometimes, and I'm guilty of this, sometimes like, is the cost okay? But where's the value? Where's the value outside of that procurement exercise? And in my view, in manufacturing, if I can reduce one accident, just one, right, it's going to pay. We just have to be better at proving it. I cannot just say, hey, private LTE, 0 accidents. It's not how it works.
You just listed a whole host of qualitative attributes that aren't necessarily dealing with the bottom line or a budget or a dollar sign. But in the end, it does cost them if there's an accident. In the end, it is risk. It is operations or putting people, human power, in other positions in that factory that are where they're more needed. But it's qualitative in nature. And I think that if you don't get into the nuts and bolts of the industry, of the core operations, the application area, then it's a moot point. I think a lot of folks think about the business value or use cases, and they're so high level. But when you start to dig in the nuts and bolts of it, the economics aren't there, the value proposition's not there. You're not going to go to market that way, and you're not going to be able to speak to those business decision makers and make a difference. You're not going to persuade them.
It's tough in the telecom industry to come in to deliver some of this in-factory domain expertise. And sometimes I wonder, like, if I am a domain expert in all things networking, which I'm not, by the way, but do I need to understand the difference between laser guiding and magnet guiding under the floorboard of a factory to tell you that my solution delivers value? This is why we have the whole IoT thing, and this is why things are fragmented. And this is why the partnerships, this is what drives partnerships. You have a set of enterprise customers that need to know that the people representing whatever it is that the solution is, that they could get into the weeds, into the minutia of everything they're touching. And you can only do that with partners.
It's interesting that you're saying that, because you would almost assume that you would go into a client environment armed with an understanding of what the value is of the technology you're selling. And I think you're making an interesting point here, because oftentimes the telcos don't, right? They don't. They're coming in going, hey, I have this promise of 5G, you're gonna like it, right? And then when they get this reaction from the client that they go, no, I like my old stuff, don't mess with it, I just need X, Y, and Z, and none of them end up being anything that's going to really capitalize on a lot of the technologies you're trying to sell to them. You know, it kind of brings us back to this weird challenge that I think operators have. 5G actually, for the most part in the early phase, is going to be an operator dilemma or issue. For the most part, it's a reinvention of their networks, and actually it's a very significant one. Rob, I think you said, 5G is not just another G. I agree, it's not, because they have this whole other element of compute converging with the network. That's huge. But going back to what I said earlier, 5G is an evolution. For most IoT end users or customers, they're not going to care about the fact that 5G can connect 1 million devices in a square kilometer. That's something that carrier needs to worry about and figure out, how do I scale that out in a way where I can actually drive revenues and make money for the investment that I'm making in densifying the network and reinventing and revamping my network. And so Marc, you bring up the low power, the LPWAN stuff. That I think is one category of IoT. And then what, David, you're talking about indoors in factories, that's an entirely different category. So when we look at the benefits that 5G brings to those two, what I call the macro IoT use cases or scenarios, and then the micro one, the stuff that's more private and localized, very, very different. And so you can't look at 5G with a singular lens. You have to look at it in terms of how is it impacting these different domains or scenarios, but over time. And that's the real tricky part. But for the most part, all the hoopla and the excitement is stuff that's really targeted toward operators. It's like vendors telling operators, look, you can make trillions of dollars and save the world if you invest billions of dollars with us to redo your whole network. So it's weird. They're trying to make the end markets really excited about a lot of stuff, but they cannot deliver on probably 90% of everything that they're fronting.
Right.
In front of the
You know what?
I mean, that's the reality.
I think we need to take a brief pause to look at food pictures. It's not always about music.
What is this?
Fajitas. It looks like fajitas.
Yeah, so these are actually steak fajita enchiladas, actually. And so I'll give a plug to San Carlos. It's a restaurant on Bainbridge Island. You have to take the ferry across from Seattle to go to it. I've been going there since, I think, 92. Like when I used to live on that side of the water when I was in the Navy doing submarines, we used to go there. And so I was there over the weekend, and it was fabulous. So there's your food picture break moment. Now we can get back to our regularly scheduled programming.
Well, I am somewhat offended by what they've done to that enchilada. But hey.
Everybody's offended these days.
You're Dominican, right?
Yeah. But I love Mexican food, like authentic Mexican. That one is fusion. But look, back to this before I forget.
It tastes good.
No, it's an entire experience. Let's.
You'll freak out a lot of Americans if you take them to an actual authentic Mexican restaurant. They don't know what that means.
Yeah.
I will respond. I will respond to this offline. But Leonard, back to your last comment. Now, in parallel to whether this is 5G and the journey, and this is ultimately a vendor to telco business, and everything's happening there. If I'm on the outside and I'm a key stakeholder at a large enterprise, and I'm looking at this with an eye of healthy skepticism, right, to try to read the tea leaves kind of thing. If I, as a large enterprise, if I am not trying to figure out where the virtualization of this hardware or virtualization of applications is going, if I don't get in a journey that leverages some of this tech, I think I can show up with 5G tomorrow, and I might not be able to do anything with it because, again, I haven't virtualized anything. I don't understand, distributing workloads. I haven't put anything on K8s or Dockers. And I like to bring that point because when 5G is here so that we can all consume it, and again, private enterprises are getting this first. There's also like a checklist of technology that if the customer has not been on this technology roadmap already, they just might not be able to leverage all of the awesome technology that 5G will ultimately bring. It's not too many people are going to forklift technology out. So that's another parallel conversation.
Don't you think you have to do a little bit of forklifting anyways, regardless of
eventually?
Yeah, and here's the thing, today the value case or business case for industrial, especially manufacturing, or the best case is what Rob talked about, security. Now you have eSIMs, you have soft SIMs, makes the provisioning and basically deployment of compliant devices and management of those devices much easier, right? But then to Rob's point, it's massively secure compared to Wi-Fi or other protocols that you try to use. And now if you're going into the shop floor and you're broadcasting your network versus having a wireline and quote unquote physically secure, now it starts to make sense. But URL LLC, that's the primary use case, and that ends up being the last one. When you look at the continuum of how 5G is evolving, that's also the friggin' hardest. I mean, if you really, really think about what it'll take for you to have a deterministic network, that is time sensitive and can support all the stuff that would be needed to replace wireline Ethernet, that's a really, really, really dense and tough deployment. And there's the good news is there's technologies today that can help that happen, but it all boils down to dinero, right?
Yeah. You're right, but I think we should also. You're right. We should just call out the difference between a discrete Ethernet connection in a machine and an Ethernet connection for network to the machine.
Yeah.
The latter, we can all day.
We're talking industrial.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, for that, I mean, like maybe my kids, will leverage that. But, man, look, if we were all building a factory from scratch, a lighthouse factory, it makes sense. I just think that as industry folk, we should. No. Oh, we're going to disagree here. I think
it all depends. Here, I'll throw this out to you. It depends on what you want to do. So, I wrote that paper, 5G Autonomous Edge. One of the things that you have to recognize is this, because we had to answer this question. It all depends on what you're manufacturing, how you want to manufacture it. For mass production, no. Not necessarily. There's a lot of things you can do to customize things on a production line, fixed production line. There's a lot of things you can do customization. Where you're going to start to see value is if you start to make this move toward mass customization. That's a totally different game. So if you're looking at environments, the ideal environment for 5G would be a a shop floor at a contract manufacturer where, I mean, they literally need to flex all their resources, retool very quickly. I mean, you're going to see new opportunities in environments like that require a tremendous amount of flex. Yeah. And that presents a huge innovation opportunity for them in terms of not only an operating model, but also, from a capability model, right? Think about that. Right. And those are the kind of things that you have to look for in the IoT world for 5G. There's a lot of competition, like Marc, what you're saying, for the macro stuff, the stuff that's low powered. You're not sending telemetry every millisecond. You have like LPWAN, Sigfox, blah, 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 all that stuff competing in that domain. So it's not necessarily 5G that you're looking at, but at the end of the day, a lot of this is going to converge onto 5G because 5G is about multi-access, right? And that's what I think a lot of folks don't understand. That it's not just about wireless. It's about how do we bring all this stuff together and then make it work and then have these new architectures that we can have that provide and broker connectivity across all kinds of different access modes, right?
Wow, you said a lot of stuff there.
Oh, man.
But you know what I took away from that, modularity, Leonard. That modularity is that's it. That's the holy grail. To be able to go from building that to building this, including your entire infrastructure, that's the ticket.
Hey, Rob, I occasionally have to say something smart, right?
Every once in a while.
I can't just play guitar all the time.
Yeah. If you ever want to see a greenfield smart factory of the future, Ericsson built one in Lewisville, Texas, outside of Dallas. And so it's a 5G factory. The whole factory is run on, and funnily enough, it's 5G factory to make 5G equipment.
Yes. You guys deliver big box store, CTO. I didn't get one, but that was pretty cool.
Hey, it's Marc, chicken and egg. What came first, the chicken or the egg, right? The 5G equipment or the 5G factory?
But what was cool about building that 5G factory wasn't just saying, hey, here's a showcase, a lighthouse, to show how it can work. But it also showed off other use cases. How we talk about 5G and low latency and and having the bandwidth to drive, like augmented reality, things like that. As part of creating that factory and training the people having to man it, we actually used our technology with a factory in Europe. I think it was in Tallinn, actually. Anyway, over high-speed links, guys with goggles, learning from people who are already building that stuff in a factory in Europe, teaching them how to do the same thing in Texas. It was a kind of a multifaceted use of eating your own dog food, right?
Yeah.
To make it real. We built it, we learned it, we trained it, because we talk about that kind of stuff all the time, and it was good to make that real.
Yeah. That's really cool. I still need to tour that place.
Yeah.
Vico, he invited me way back when he was with Ericsson, but now it's too late.
Wow. Let me explain you some experiences I had, at least with NB-IoT, that it's not 5G. Sorry, I don't have any experience with 5G yet. I'm completely virgin on that. But let me explain you something that will apply for 5G probably in the future. And this is something that I saw on several telcos that I have been working with. And it's like, that they were trying to sell IoT projects as usual, as everyone, but not telling to the customer all the possibility. So we saw a couple of years ago, like the chip that you need, the concentrator that you need to send data to NB-IoT, or actually with backups with GPRS, etc., that it was 25 times more expensive than another one with LoRa or Sigfox. And the device actually could make actually the same. It's not like a factory or something. We are speaking about devices that can do the same, actually sending 12 bytes or 1 megabyte every time that sends data. So what I didn't like is that they try to sell like over expensive devices. And on the other hand, what I didn't like neither is that they didn't help the chip manufacturers to get lower prices. So this is something, for example, that I like it from Sigfox. So they help chip manufacturers to reach the price of the concentrator to $1 per that chip. So to send Sigfox data, you just need to pay an extra $1 for your device. So that's smart for me. And that's what I don't see that telcos, for example, nowadays are helping these silicon chip manufacturers to make cheap devices to make this scalability, that we talked some weeks ago on the IoT Coffee Talk. And this is actually as well what I would like to see on 5G or NB-IoT strategies, help these chip vendors or silicon vendors to make cheap modems, etc., for devices to enable this scalability.
I say no, I think it's bloody genius. I'm going to take the clip and send it to someone whose name I won't pronounce on this recorded podcast. No, look, what you're talking about is a telco that would effectively benefit from lower cost, greater adoption of devices to get things on their network. It's a no-brainer. I think it's just a matter of this is not a point of strategy. It could be that there isn't a dedicated team, because what you will see in telcos, every telco in the world, is going to have a team to make sure that from a device certification perspective, things get certified that do not harm the network. Everyone has that, but you might not have someone who, like you described, Marc, which I think it's a business development thing of like, okay, if I'm on the front end of certification to get things on my network, what can I do to drive costs down, drive scale adoption? Do I have a partner that can help this person work on this semiconductor or on this component or on this chipset? I think that's lacking, and you just defined what looks like a job requirement for a telco to have. Like, where is this person that's charged from certification to business development through the entire SOC chip development process?
Yeah,
who's hiring?
Not all sales teams and consulting teams are trained equally, and you're making a really great point. So as telcos are going into this quote unquote new domain, they need to train their people. I've bumped into a lot of telco folks who don't really know 5G, and that might sound like a counterintuitive, but it's true. There's executives I've met who don't really fully grasp 5G. And it's true. It takes time to get people up to speed on what the technology really means beyond just, the ITU use cases of, enhanced mobile broadband, blah, 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 all the stuff that we're familiar with and the promise. Going around saying that, oh, now you can do AR, VR. I mean, if that's all you know about 5G, you're not going to sell a lot of stuff. Right. Especially down in the weeds with the IoT stuff, man, you got to really come in with some stuff that makes sense, and you need to understand the economics, because some of this 5G stuff, it can be really friggin' expensive, compared to other options. But what are the merits of 5G today, and what are they going forward? Those are the things that we need to start getting folks to understand, whether you use it or not, because there are going to be alternatives. It's just helping solution designers have the right kind of decision criteria as well as a decision framework to determine, okay, should we go with this technology or that one? There's never a right technology. There's the best one that you can have at any given point in time. But, I think the important thing to note here is that 5G is an evolution. So people who are responsible for purchasing services really need to know the roadmap. If you don't, then you're you can either overshoot or you can undershoot, and you want to do neither. You really want to be able to hone in and evolve your infrastructures and your applications in a way that take advantage of what the technology provides at any given point in time. And that's the trademark of a good architect, right? A good architect knows how to design forward, not just simply look at, who are the vendors who are buying me the most bottles of scotch at Christmas time. It's what do we need to do in order to make this stuff future-proof? Because we've already talked about that in the past, right? These things have to last.
Right. And so let's talk about rapid fire, all the pillars of 5G maybe really fast, and see how they align with stuff that enterprises already understand. Obviously everyone, the first thing people talk about when they talk about a 5G is just speed, bandwidth, right? Faster cat videos. So when we think in terms of what is that equivalent to or replacing in the enterprise, it's replacing Ethernet, right? Because today the fastest thing you can do short of your fiber is Ethernet in your network. And so knowing that 5G is going to give you crazy speed depending on the spectrum and all that kind of stuff, that's your Ethernet replacement. Another big thing, obviously, in enterprises is segments and different networks and quality of service. And that's why we have network slicing, which is part of 5G. And so being able to create different slices of networks without them necessarily having to be the private networks that we talked about earlier, that can provide different quality of service, bandwidth, low bandwidth, high bandwidth, things like that. That's going to be something that enterprises are going to be interested in because it's stuff they understand today.
Yeah, you triggered me, dude. Right now, the way that enterprises look at wireless networks is best effort, right? Going forward with the URLLC stuff, you actually need to have a closed loop. You need to do test monitoring and then persistent monitoring to make sure that if you have a private implementation in your factory floor and you're relying on the 6 nines or the 7 or 8 nines, there's no 7 or 8 nines, 6 nines, right? You need to be able to measure the network and then determine any of the dead spots, right? Because if you hit a dead spot, next thing you know, your little robot bumps into somebody and pushes them into a vat of white goop, and then they turn into the Joker.
The Joker, yeah. Yes. That's what everybody thinks usually is you turn into the Joker. Or the Toxic Avenger, going further back.
There you go. Green. Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, we talked about the low latency stuff. That's another aspect that we need to replace. And sometimes you need it and sometimes you don't. And you're right. Today, wireless has been best effort. And so it's a great point. It's funny. Again, it's back to that whole economic discussion. Am I replacing one thing for another in the enterprise? That's a hard sell sometimes, unless they need that agility for that mass customization like we hear about in Industry 4.0 scenarios. And also, don't forget, there's a few things that are as expensive as running cable. Running cable places to monitor or do things is horribly expensive. And time consuming, both in the product and the labor to do it. Anytime you can do wireless and say, hey, I'm going to get you the same bang for your buck that you got with Ethernet, that's good. The other economics is on the mobile operators themselves. So for the last 5 years, what's it been like to be a mobile operator? Revenues have been flat or declining for all mobile operators around the world for the last half decade. And now they're being asked to make the biggest investment of their lives to roll out 5G, right? And so that's an interesting scenario for a whole industry whose revenues are flat or declining.
And here's the crazy
make a big investment.
Here's a crazy thing, dude. You still have these webinars and stuff on whether it's light reading or GSMA or whatever, talking about, well, how do telcos make money and recoup their investment in 5G? So they're throwing money at this thing without having a clear idea of how they're going to make the return.
Yeah.
And the more that you dig into this stuff, you realize it is going to be hard. It's not going to be easy. I don't know where people go around, coming up with this idea that these hyped technologies are going to be easy. History never has told us that it's easy. You have tons of money that chase bad opportunities and things just go down into the toilet, and then you're emerging from the slope of enlightenment or whatever it's called.
Yeah.
Leonard, for those companies that have a lot of infrastructure in the ground, the reality is that there's other uses for it. So 5G, you need fiber for 5G. Well, what else can you do with that fiber? There's that. If you haven't completely sold off your tower assets, what can you do with that, in the context of or smart cities? Sure. Don't completely break the neck of the telco friend, because there's avenues for it. On the flip side, look, no matter whose report you look at, the CAGR, traditional networking, the cost keeps coming down because, things are getting virtualized. There's all sorts of advancements, but the things that telcos have to do in order to deploy their version of 5G, that underlying infrastructure will be worth something to someone for several years to come.
Right. Or here's the other thing that people need to think about. Or are you just keeping up with Moore's Law? Because everything underneath what a telco does is getting cheaper, faster, easier. And so that's something to think about. And as a consumer, as everything else continues to advance, you don't expect to pay more for a service that you are used to. I don't want to pay more to a telco for connectivity. What I pay right now is fine. I want more.
Yeah.
I'm not going to pay more for 5G.
Yeah. That's the other part of that whole predicament that telcos find themselves in is people want faster bandwidth connectivity, but they're absolutely unwilling to pay for it, extra for it. And also this move to 5G, despite the expense and all that, telcos have no choice. It's table stakes now, because all you have to do is just look at the GSMA charts of bandwidth usage. It's just like exponential because people are doing videos. And so you actually have no choice but to upgrade to 5G in order to get that capacity and bandwidth to serve the needs of a whole universe of people who are watching videos 24/7 on their phones.
Let's be honest. This is a genius marketing campaign by the antenna manufacturer.
Yeah, but
I still remember the Mobile World Congress, not last Mobile World Congress, with the last one that happened. It was 5G, right? The topic was 5G, and I remember people asking me, like a lot of people ask me, "Hey, you know about that? So what's 5G? What is 5G? Where can I get connected?" And yeah, guys, this is a marketing campaign made by Nokia, Huawei, Ericsson, and antenna manufacturers to create the demand of 5G and force the telcos to invest on 5G. I don't know. Am I wrong?
No, you're not entirely wrong. I mean, that's I guess that's what some folks can consider the benefits of hype. You get people excited and dumping money into something. And then in the early phases, you can't deliver on most of what you're getting people excited about. And then you get egg on your face, and then you spend the next decade trying to get the egg off.
Yeah. Absolutely, yeah. I think it's
the weird thing is that's how it works all the time, But
absolutely, I'm not complaining how it will work.
I'm not going to make any comments about what you just said.
Yeah, I was going to say me neither, but good hearing from you, Marc. Always great insight.
Yeah. But
thanks for blowing up our whole industry, Marc.
No, hey, you know what? Look at it. He's giving the industry shortcuts. It's like, let's just cut through the BS and get to what's valuable at any given point in time. I think that's really the point we're trying to make here, right? Let the people who do what they do with the hype do what they do. They're chasing ghosts. While the rest of us, let's focus on what's valuable. Listen to guys like Rob, to David, to Marc, Rick, whenever the hell he actually gets back on, and Stephanie, to figure out how to really make something valuable out of this stuff at any given
But don't misunderstand me. I think it's great, the technology. I mean, I love the cloudlets, I think it's called, the data centers on the base stations. I love this the speed, etc., etc. So this is just, it's not here, but it will, but not yet.
Right. And
just manage expectations of people and companies and developers.
That's all. And then, don't get companies now that don't have cash investing in something that they can't really afford and won't get tons of benefit from. I think that's a service.
That's a good one,
service, right? And that's why they need guys like you, Marc, and, Rob, and to bring sensibility to the dialogue. So anyways,
what Marc just said was that saying you've heard, the future is already here. It's just not evenly distributed.
Yeah.
Not fairly distributed.
Oh, yeah.
Exactly. It's all in Texas.
It's all in Texas. Yeah. The future is in Texas.
All right. Okay, guys, I'm done. And speaking of antenna companies, I'm not doing a plug, but I just happen to have this cup, so it's empty. I know this is a long one. Hopefully you got a lot of value out of it, but thank you for joining and reaching the end of this podcast, and we'd love to hear from you. So please feel free to comment, react to what we're talking about on any of these podcasts, and subscribe to our YouTube channel at www.iotcoffeetalk.com. And next week, we should have another interesting topic to wrap on. Until then, be safe and be healthy, and we'll see you next time, right?
Yeah. Have a good week.